I don't feel like it's so necessary to kind of categorize things, and when you categorize them, I think you put limits on what can and cannot be accepted into certain groups or circles. The experience of being mixed, it really kind of sets me up for kind of like an awareness, like to really think critically about all different sides and scenarios and perspectives, and I would hate to like limit any.
I don't really know what I would have in common, even with someone who's mixed, like South Asian and Black. Like, you know, like what do we really have in common besides like a box we check on the census?
I don't know. I feel like it's too fractured. Like, there's differences, like
theoretical perspective and there's a practical perspective. Definitely, it would allay a lot of the fears that people have about understanding themselves or not understanding themselves in terms of mixed race identity. I feel it would foster community. Even, you know, whether that community initially roots itself in race is irrelevant ultimately to the success of that community long term, because it'll need to build on something else.
The differences that students in a multiracial affinity group would have to overcome versus the differences between students in a monoracial or a single ethnicity affinity group would have to overcome. I think the differences are greater in a multiracial affinity group.
Because multiracial right now is like almost like a fix-it kind of thing, right? It doesn't mean anything. Like, everyone is multiracial to a degree, unless you were generations of like Icelandic people who never left Iceland or whatever. You know, it's like a facile way to think about race in the first place. But people think about it because of the practical perspective. And from the practical perspective, I'd say, well, it's not really answering any questions. It's not really making things better. It's kind of just like winding around in the same direction.
Like, I don't know if there can ever really be like a true cohesion amongst mixed race people, like maybe among Hapas, maybe among like half black, but it's like I just don't see like half black, half white people and like Hapas fighting more in common than like Hapas with other Hapas or half black people with black people or something like that.
It's just like the mixed race experience is going to always be like something undefinable, because there's no one way to be mixed.
Forget like different racial compositions, right? Like, you're German Chinese, I'm French Chinese. If someone was 3/4 French and 1/4 Chinese, and 1/4 French and 3/4 Chinese, it would already make a massive difference. So you have already, as I said, particular experiences between people with the same racial compositions but in different proportions, and people with different racial compositions in the same proportions.
Part of the mixed race experience that you don't really have like a mixed race experience to sort of draw on. There's no real like common history that you can be like, this is a history of people who look like me. You're just sort of like drawing bits and pieces together.
Okay, this is a whole experience that this group of people is having, even though we all are of different heritages, and like some people don't share any of the same racial components that I share, but we still have very similar experiences just because that's what it is to be a mixed race person.
From a practical standpoint, I think it's ultimately not useful. It should be replaced by stronger manners of identifying oneself with those identities, and as Root argues, the validation of the legitimization of one's decision as a mixed race person to be able to identify himself or herself by one race more than the other in different circumstances.
There are always going to be different experiences, but somehow there are always like umbrella categories for it, like your experiences as far as how it comes to passing, and like what it's like when you get the "what are you" question, and like how your different families interact. Like, there are always like general themes that people can go with.
You can like find common ground with other people even though their experiences are different from yours. And so it does become this kind of way of unifying. And then now in like the postmodern context, we have the term people of color, which just refers to anyone who like isn't fully white. And then that's a bigger form of like finding common ground with people who like have different experiences from yours. And so then I guess there is that way in which you can like bridge all these different experiences by this experience, by like the simple commonality of not being white.
Well, I guess just being acknowledged is a lot of what it would be, just being recognized as legitimate and not having to like justify ourselves anymore. Like everybody comes from very different places, but somehow we all have like these things in common. I think that's pretty awesome.
Like I write about biracial stuff, and even just like I felt suicidal before I had identity issues, and like when I went in this Reddit and like they were like, oh, like this writer, like he writes for like Vice or whatever, like he's he's gonna do M&A, like maybe he can start speaking about our issues, and they were like asking me questions, like I was like, wow, like they are viewing me as like some type of like semi-successful hop on that I can like write for this magazine that they read or whatever, and like that to them is like their role model. Like when they're talking about criminals and all these guys who have mental issues, like they don't have any role models on this page. And I think one of the biggest, this actually only happened like 2 weeks ago, and this felt like a very much like I'm moving on, and that I've been having identity issues and like being like, and I had started to think like, wait, like as I've been reading this Hapa's group like in preparation for this AMA and being like, wait, there are no white like role models who have my ancestry, like there's nobody out there. Like I'm truly alone. I have nobody to look up to, like blah blah blah.
Yeah, through my film, I got really involved with this organization called Loving Day, which is kind of an unofficial national holiday that celebrates the Supreme Court case Loving v. Virginia, which legalized interracial marriage. And what was really interesting was that it was started out of New York by this guy named Ken Tanabe, who part of his like Parsons like senior thesis project was to kind of create a whole campaign, like a grassroots kind of movement. And so he chose like the Loving case as it. And it started like early 2000s, and it just kind of like had this like a domino effect of like so many people really identifying with the cause and identifying with the other people involved, other mixed people or people involved in interracial relationships, and wanting to like educate themselves and educate others and like kind of really come together as a community. He does a flagship kind of like celebration every June 12th to like commemorate the passing of the case. I went to I think probably like the 9th annual celebration on the FDR, so they do a huge like barbecue event every June 12th on the water where like 2,000 people come. There's like a DJ, music, dancing, food, like kids and family are all there, and then there's also a lot of like information just to be accessible to know what kind of resources are out there. Like they are sponsored by a group called Mixed Marrow, which helps people of mixed race backgrounds get bone marrow transplants, because that's something really like hard to find a match if you're mixed race, which I didn't know before this. But anyway, so yeah, I got involved with them from my film, and I was like, this would be a great community to be a part of. And it was really interesting because it was started, the guy Ken Tanabe is half Japanese and Belgian, and like before this, I didn't really know anyone who was older than me who is mixed race, and specifically like being mixed Asian. And this was like a community that was like kind of older than me, and it was like interesting to see like where they were at in their like life stage and also being mixed.
But I mean, like I think mixed race people are really like just disrupting everything, which is just exactly what needs to happen as far as race relations in America.
If I was a full race person, I probably would wish I was mixed race.
Yeah.